This blows my mind, that people who go into a coma can come out speaking a totally different language, and not even a language that they had necessarily mastered before they went into the coma.
Yeah, I think it's really crazy. And a lot of this happened, their comas came from head trauma. So I'm always asking, like, where on their head were they hit? And like, what parts of your brain bring up language?
I mean, your brain is controlled by language, and they have studies where different languages influence you in different ways. There's a study that was done in Australia where they had a local tribe go through a maze, and without being able to see left or right, they asked, which direction are you facing? And they always knew northeast, southwest. And then you put an English speaker through, they have no idea, because our orientation is through left and right. So it makes sense that if you hit your head, language could shift fundamentally because it shapes your entire brain and how you see things.
And another thing I noticed with this, there was a pattern of these people had almost all, or maybe all of them, had previously been exposed to that language they started speaking in some regard or another. Like they took a class, like a Spanish class, or they went to a French country and were exposed to that language as well. But I still think that it is absolutely bizarre that, you know, I can say como está, but like, I can't imagine waking up and being like, like rattling it off.
I took French 1, 2, and 3 in high school. I am not fluent in French. I can say, hello, my name is, and maybe order a croissant and ask where the toilet is. So does that mean that if I'm hit in the head, I'm suddenly going to be fluent? Like it's a rare
Yeah,
phenomenon.
because it's in there.
Let me ask you, if you were to watch, let's say, a French television show or a movie, would you understand enough to kind of figure out what's going on in the movie?
Barely.
Well, the reason why I'm asking that is that we have stuff that's in our brain, but we cannot retrieve it. And a case in point, when we're speaking about language, I can sit and I can understand stuff in French, but I can't speak it, which means that I know the vocabulary, but my brain, I haven't mastered it so that I can actually retrieve it and then, you know, produce it, but I can understand it.
We've recorded it.
Yeah, so my brain has recorded it.
You know what's really cool? Have you ever watched like stage hypnosis where somebody is hypnotized and says, okay, come out and sing this song, right? And I've had friends who've done this and they've only heard maybe a fraction of the words they know, but they get up there and they're perfect with all the lyrics and everything. So every sense that we have, hearing, seeing, feeling, somewhere it's stored in this file system. We just can't access it all the time.
It might also matter how you learn the language too. Did you learn it as a child growing up, or did you learn it by rote later, like in high school or something like that? Because that might be in two different spots.
Now, in this particular case, it was a 16-year-old boy named Reuben, got kicked in the head, and apparently he was exposed to Spanish because his older brother was learning Spanish.
Right.
Now, according to some of the research that I did, it said that he was only exposed to some key phrases. But I'm curious to know what is key phrases, because key phrases can actually translate to a conversational version of said language.
But it's a good point. I mean, it's kind of miraculous to see somebody who's waking up and is fluent, even if they say, yes, maybe I was exposed to the language, but I don't actually know the language.
There's a guy named Ben McMahon who went into a coma, who was English speaking, and he comes out speaking Mandarin.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
After waking up from the coma, I saw a Chinese-looking nurse. And because the first person I spoke to was in Mandarin, my internal monologue became Chinese.
所以你们在澳大利亚的时候会用英语来交流，可是在中国你们会用中文呢？
What the hell?
Okay, that is crazy.
But he also kept it in almost every case that we've seen.
They have exposure.
They've had exposure, but also it kind of fades after a couple of weeks. And this guy, I feel like he knew Mandarin ahead of time. But also,
You're a skeptic? What happened?
who would have thought?
My heart be still.
Who would have thought? But I mean, the fact that he is still speaking Mandarin and it didn't fade away.
I don't think there's any way to discredit this. I mean, whether or not somebody was exposed, that's one conversation or the other, but to actually wake up and be fluent, like he's working on television in the language, that's amazing.
I don't know. I think your brain can retain a lot more than you perceive it to retain, and based on its neuroplasty, it can actually, you can pull memories from it after brain damage that you didn't even know was there. Like you don't know it on your conscious.
Do you think that while he was in a coma, or while these people were in a coma, maybe their nurses were speaking other languages around them, so maybe that's how they picked stuff up?
Not necessarily. I think he already knew this stuff, but also You can see sometimes that people, when they speak another language but don't feel comfortable about it, they'll say things like, oh, but when I'm drunk, I can speak it a lot better. And it's because you're more relaxed and you just let yourself flow, right? Your inhibitions go away.
But how does it knock the English out of you?
That's the thing, because typically, I know that the language centers of the brain are in the same place, right? So the brain is amazing, but if you really focus on one language, for example, when I was speaking fluent Spanish in South America, I came home and I couldn't speak English. It's like because I didn't use that same vocabulary anymore.
There's an argument that that in our U.S. brains, we're left brain for language. So if we have damage to the left side of our brain, or if that's where the swelling is after an injury, that other parts of your brain compensate, and the thought is that sometimes other language learning goes into other parts of our brain, which may explain that.
Language is learned. I learned 2 languages growing up, and because when we moved to the US, we mostly obviously speak English. I'm still pretty fluent in my native tongue, but I've lost a lot of it. I'd have to sometimes think about sentence structure, although I learned them at the same time. So if you don't use it, you lose it.
Here's something really interesting that happened. In 2012, there's this guy named Rory Curtis, and he got into a really bad accident. He studied French in the 9th grade. He was 22 when this accident happened. Now he woke up, he was speaking French, but also he thought that he was Matthew McConaughey, and it took a long time for everybody to convince him, no, baby, you are not.
Well, that's just brain damage. Okay?
You are
That's
not.
just brain
But he
damage.
was also speaking fluent French, and like my French, I at least did it up until 12th grade. My 9th grade French, probably don't remember any of that.
The truth is, tragically, most people that have closed head injuries do not experience any acceleration, they experience deterioration. This is really unusual.
Quite rare.
It's miraculous.